أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم Assalamu alaikum dear students. I wish and hope all of you and your family members will be doing fine and enjoying your health. And you might have got your midterm scores as well. So in our today's lecture, we will continue with our previous lecture discussions about arms control and disarmament. And in the previous lecture, we had a brief discussion about the definitional issues of both the concepts of arms control and disarmament, and we also discussed a brief background to both these concepts of arms control and disarmament. In our today's discussion, we will talk about the major arms control treaties and agreements that were signed among the member states of the United Nations in order to reduce the threat of war and in order to preserve the international peace and security. So, without wasting further time, we will have a look at the major armed control treaties and agreements, and we will pick only the very few and crucial treaties for thorough discussion in our upcoming lectures, because of the limited time because of the remaining limited time of this semester, we might not have been able to discuss all the treaties and agreements thoroughly. So we will just choose the most important treaties and agreements regarding arms control and armaments in the context of the Cold War. So now we will have a look at the various treaties and agreements signed between the states of the world, from especially after the 1945 till the closure of the until the closure of the Cold War, which is the timeline of our specific course which we are discussing in this, which we are focusing on this ongoing semester. So we will start from the period from 1945 till 1990 in particular, but we will try to include some of the other arms control treaty after the closure of the Cold War as well. So the Antarctic Treaty partial nuclear. Under this treaty, it was prohibited all military activities in the Arctic Circle. In the Arctic region, all the states were not allowed to have any military activity, and that treaty was signed in 1959, and 12 states were the members of were the signatories of this very treaty. Later in 1963, a test ban treaty was signed by 131 countries of the world, and this test ban treaty prohibits nuclear explosions in the atmosphere, particularly in the outer space and the underwater. Later in 1967, the Outer Space Treaty was signed by 127 member states of the United Nations, and military activities in outer space, both on the moon and other celestial bodies, were prohibited. And further in 1967, the Treaty of Tellico was signed by 31 countries of the world, and the use of nuclear weapon was prohibited in Latin America under that treaty. The next one is the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, which was signed in 1968, and it was almost signed by almost all the member states of the United Nations. This is one of the key treaties in the context of arms control and disarmament, and under this treaty, the acquisition of nuclear weapons by non-nuclear nations was prohibited, and non-nuclear states at that time were not allowed to acquire nuclear weapons. So the expansion of nuclear weapons was restricted by this very treaty, which is known as the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. We will have a thorough discussion about this very treaty in our upcoming lectures because of its immense significance in the context of armament and arms control, in the context of the Cold War between the United States and the Soviet Union. Later in 1971, Seabed Arms Control Treaty was signed by 92 member states of the world, and this treaty placed a ban on nuclear weapons under the seabed. In 1972, Biological Weapon Convention was signed by 80, more than 80 states of the world, and this treaty prohibited the possession and both the possession and use of biological weapons. So we will continue our discussion about the arms control treaties and convention, and we will talk about the SALT one, which is the Strategic Arms Limitation Treaty that was signed in 1972, and we already have discussion about a thorough discussion about this treaty. It was signed by the United States and the Soviet Union, and it provides for freezing on aggregate number of fixed land-based ICBMs and SLBMs. Further, in 1972, another significant treaty, that is the Anti-Ballistic Missile Treaty, which is known as the ABM Treaty, and again that was signed by the United States and the Soviet Union, that put limits on the deployment of anti-ballistic missile systems. Before, two sites in each country were allowed, and three strictly it was reduced to one site by 1974 agreement. Threshold Testament Treaty, again an important treaty in the context of the arms control and disarmament, and again it was signed by the major contestant of the Cold War, that is the United States of America and the Soviet Union, and this was signed in 1974, and it put limits on the underground test to 150 locations. SALT 2, that was signed in 1979 by the United States of America and the Soviet Union, is another significant treaty in the context of the arms control and disarmament, and we already have discussed a lot about this Treaty of SALT 2. It put a limit on the number and types of strategic weapons possessed both by the United States of America and the Soviet Union. And in the 80s, the South Pacific Nuclear Free Zone Treaty was signed in 1985 by 13 member states of the world, and this treaty prohibits the manufacture or acquisition of the nuclear weapons in the region, in the region of South Pacific. In 1987, the Intermediate Range Nuclear Force Treaty was signed by both the United States and the Soviet Union. That is another significant treaty that was signed both by the major contestants of the Cold War. And this treaty eliminates all US and Soviet missiles with ranges between 500 to 5,500 kilometers. Later in 1987, another treaty known as the Missile Technology Regime was signed by 25 member states of the world, and this treaty puts limits on the transfer of missiles or missiles technology by one country to another. So the transfer of both open and secret transfer of missiles or missiles technology was made prohibited by this missile technology regime. In 1990s, conventional armed forces in Europe was signed by 30 countries of the world, and this convention sets limits on NATO and Warsaw tanks and other armored vehicles, artillery, combat helicopters, and aircraft. So this very treaty is no more because of the dismemberment of the Soviet Union and the consequent failure of the Cold War. This treaty became ineffective, and another crucial treaty in the context of the arms control is the Comprehensive Test Ban Treaty, known as the CTBT. It was almost It was signed by almost all the countries of the world, and that through this treaty the nuclear tests were banned, only allowed some of the subcritical tests through this treaty, and it was signed in 1996. So, in the new world order, which was established after the closure of the Cold War in 1991, the another treaties known as START 1 and START 2 are some of the key treaties in the context of the arms control, and we would have a thorough discussion about these treaties in our upcoming lectures. Okay, now as the time for your final term exam is approaching near, so I think it is imperative for me to ask you to start working on your research assignment, and we will take a few minutes of this lecture to discuss the range of topics for your research assignment and some of the requirements for your research assignments. So the range of topics includes the events that occurred in international relations from 1945 till 1990s, and such as the development of Cold War in Europe, the development of Cold War in Asia, in the Middle East, in Africa, and the arms control agreements, the arms control treaties, and the end of Cold War, and the New World Order, etc. So some of these topics we already have discussed in our lectures in this semester, and you can choose as far as the topic of assignment is concerned. You can also choose the relationship between major contestants of the Cold War from 1945 to 1999 for your research assignment, and you can also choose the various concepts which we have discussed in the Cold War in our discussions, in our lecture discussions for your research assignments, and these agreements, arms control agreements and treaties can also be selected for research topics. So you have a quite extensive range of research topics uh, for the selection of your research topic, and um I would give you this freedom to choose your research topic by yourself, and I would require all of you to take a week or two to inform me about the topic of your assignment. Otherwise, later on, those who will not send me their topics for assignment, I will assign some of the topics for research assignment, and those will be the finals. I mean, those will not be changed later on. Okay, now we will talk about some of the requirements for the research assignment. First of all, it will be of 20 marks. So all the sessional marks will be covered by this one assignment, and as far as the research assignment is concerned, it should be with research oriented. It should not just be copy paste stuff. You are advised to make it innovative and exploratory, and it should be properly structured. The research methodology, the background, and the main body and the findings should be presented in uh, your assignment in a properly structured manner. And one other significant thing is that it should be handwritten assignment. The soft form assignments, the typed assignments will not be accepted. Please keep that thing in your mind, and you are supposed to write your own assignments by yourself, not by somebody else. And it should contain proper references, and the minimum reference limit is 10 reference. So your assignment contain at least 10 references, and these references should be put in a proper way. So both footnotes and in-text references will be allowed. If you have any queries about footnotes and in-text references, you can ask me individually about that, and I would tell you how to put footnotes and references in your assignment. And as far as the referencing style is concerned, all of you are advised to choose Chicago manual style for references and footnotes. And as far as the minimum word limit is concerned, it should be between 1500 to 2000 words at least. And don't forget the deadline to submit your assignment. The deadline for submission of your assignments would be the closing date of your final exams. No one will be given extra time, so keep preparing your assignments in an efficient way, and because nobody will be given extra time for submission of assignment. So that is all about our today's discussion, and we'll see you in for our next lecture. Wish you all the best. Stay safe and healthy. Allah Hafiz.